It'd be safe to say that sport is in the bone marrow of many a culture. It is a religion with rules, referees, balls, fans, tracks, arenas, and home and away jerseys. In Sweden, a national museum situated in the capital Stockholm celebrates sport's role in society. Opened at its current location in 2007 with funding from the government, the Riksidrottsmuseet plays an important role in representing sport in society. As sport historian and one of the founders of the museum, Carl Örshan, explains.
Sports history is not only fascinating, but we also believe it has played an important part in the creation of the Swedish society. In Sweden, we often talk about the people's movement, and the sports movement and sport really broke through around 1930, between the two world wars. And one can say that the sports movement exploded into life during that time, and that sport had and has a very important role in the creation of the Swedish society. Democratic questions, federations, building of sports grounds throughout the country, and activating people in a number of different ways. There is also, of course, a negative side in the history of sports in Sweden, but we feel that Swedish sport needs a format, a museum, to summarize sports history.
Modern competitive sports, many of which originated in the United Kingdom, came to prominence in the early 1900s, but it took almost a further century of father time to pass until women were welcomed into certain sporting establishments. The Swedish National Sports Museum aims to address the gender imbalance that exists as well as highlight other problematic side effects of sport. 20 years ago, for example, at the Olympics, women's events amassed to 1/3 of the total number of events. In London 2012, that figure reached almost 50%. Carl recalls an interesting story about the women's 800 meters at the Amsterdam Olympics of 1928.
At Amsterdam Olympics in 1928, in the women's 800 meters, two Canadian athletes crossed the finish line and threw themselves on the ground, tired from exhaustion. The general opinion at the time was that this was not the way women should behave, so the International Olympic Committee actually banned the women's 800 meters from the Olympics until the Tokyo Games in 1964, when the 800 meters returned to the program. From a genus perspective, sport has never been equal, and I would go as far as to say that it's not equal today either. It is much better, but there are still large differences between men's and women's sport.
Track and field is proudly represented in a number of different exhibitions at the museum. 1912 Stockholm Olympics saw Sweden triumph as the most successful nation, and Stefan Holm, the Olympic high jump gold medalist, graces the wall of the museum. Holm is just one of a number of Swedish track and field elite who ruled their respective disciplines in a golden era for Swedish athletics in the early 21st century.
Well, Sweden has actually been relatively successful since the start of the 20th century in athletics. But the latest group who appeared at the start of the 21st century, like Susanna Kallur, Stefan Holm, Christian Olsson and Kajsa Bergqvist, they're all amazing sport profiles, and one can wonder why it is they succeeded when they did. I actually don't have the answer. Another similar phenomenon happened in tennis when Björn Borg broke through in the 1970s, and he became the world's best tennis player. Then into the 1980s, Sweden was suddenly full of talent, with numerous world stars. I believe that many of these type of sporting characters in a small nation like Sweden tend to come and go, and it's pretty much a chicken and egg question. Why is it that they come and go? That's very hard to answer.
There is very much an educational theme to the museum, not only through information, but visitors also get to test their sprint start against the clock, for example, and see just how high the world high jump records are. Something that will hopefully inspire the next generation of Swedish track and field elite.
In this case, it's of course not Stefan Holm in person, but it does represent his actual height, as one would see him. And it's surprising to see him like that because on television, it's harder to gauge that it's very impressive to jump as high as he does. We also have here in the museum marks on the floor, so one can see just how far the world records in long jump for men and women are. And even there, we notice how people react over whether or not it is possible to jump 8 meters 95, like Mike Powell did in 1991 at the World Championships. The world high jump record belongs to Javier Sotomayor. It's 2 meters 45, and I often ask, will someone jump 2 meters 47? Yes is normally the answer. 2 meters 50? Yes, probably. 2 meters 98, I ask then. Suddenly there is doubt. Can one actually achieve that? And then, how fast can one run? Can Usain Bolt's world record be improved to 7 seconds for the 100 meters? Maybe.
Your marks?
Set.